Welcome to the Nature India podcast from New Delhi, India. This is Shubhra Priyadarshini.
And I'm Amrita Gupta.
This episode, we are talking science and money. In November 2016, India rolled out a massive demonetization exercise in part to root out counterfeit cash. Can science stop counterfeiting? We speak to two scientists to understand what it will take to make India's currency notes harder to copy.
You can see in 254 it's showing the red. Can you see? Now I am pressing this 365. Now can you see the green color? Can you see?
That's Bipin Kumar Gupta, a scientist working on luminescent materials and devices. The glowing colors he's showing us are security inks that he's synthesized at the National Physical Laboratory in New Delhi. When these inks are excited by particular wavelengths, they glow, bright red and bright green. Gupta said he spent 7 years working on these formulas.
So then successively we change the pigment and change the medium, and ultimately now we are in the stage we make the very strong kind of the pigment that can be hard to counterfeit. We can just to make this kind of development to stop the duplicacy of the currency or duplicacy of the stamp paper or duplicacy of the like very important documents. So many important places these kind of the pigments are used for the protection of the counterfeiting.
Counterfeiting is a serious threat to the economy. The Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata estimates that 70 crore or 700 million rupees worth of fake Indian currency notes enter the system every year.
Gupta says his bioluminescent inks, made by combining nanorods of rare earth elements with light-emitting inorganic solids, will help curb that. We asked him to explain.
Normally, the tradition of the security luminescent ink is in not only in India but worldwide they are using the like single color excitable and single color emission kind of the security ink, and it's a broad excitation range, so easy to counterfeit it. But our strategy is different. So what our luminescent pigment which we have developed here, it can excite with the two colors.
These inks are non-toxic, and their pigments can be synthesized at high yields, he told us. And they're highly luminescent, basically brighter than what's used in most currencies today. Banknotes around the world are packed with security features. Not just luminescent inks, but holograms, watermarks, optically variable ink known as OVI. That's where the color shifts depending on the angle you're looking at it from. Governments spend millions on these security features. But whether it's the rupee or the euro or the dollar, the thing is counterfeiting is still rampant.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the solution might not come from material science alone. In fact, a neuroscientist from Stanford University in California, David Eagleman, says that understanding the brain is actually the key to tackling forgery. A note can be packed with security features, but the thing is, you and I don't pay attention to whether those features are there or not.
We asked Arpan Banerjee to explain. He's an associate professor at the National Brain Research Center. He spoke to us from his lab in Gurgaon.
For example, if I ask you in the lab, do you remember the signature of the person who signs, for example, the RBI governor? And most likely people won't be able to answer that question, but it is there in every note. We touch it every day, exactly.
Banerjee agrees with Eagleman's research when he says that we're surprisingly unobservant. We don't scrutinize the details in our banknotes, security features or not. And that comes down to something called salience.
Salience, by the definition, essentially means that how we understand if something is different from others. So, for example, if some red object is present amongst a bunch of green objects, you don't really care about all the other green objects, but you're the red object that pops out immediately. So what he's talking about essentially comes from the neuroscience research that has been going on in this field, that some things pop out, and if you align the pop out thing with your security device, whatever, then it will pop out better in a currency, for example.
The main reason we don't notice is because currency notes are jam-packed with other elements. Indian notes have Mahatma Gandhi, the flag, the Ashoka emblem, many monuments, even Mangalyaan, the Mars space probe.
Basically, based on in the Indian context, it is the note has to be regal, also it has to be colorful. So given all things, can we design the best place in the note? And that's actually a neuroscience question.
So what would it take to notice security features despite all this distraction?
I mean, ideally speaking, we should be going for more simple things. So, in a way, this is the same principle that what David Eagleman is talking about. And that's why he goes on saying that ideally speaking, you should have a white piece of paper and only security feature on the top of it. That way, everything pops out, right? Except that nobody will allow this.
So given that the human visual system isn't built to detect forgeries at a glance, and that we aren't likely to declutter our notes anytime soon, what's the common man to do?
Currently, what happens is that fake notes tend to surface only at banks which have the right equipment to detect them. Bipin Gupta is working on an LED based device that will help you and I quickly check if the note is real or not. He says we'll just have to scan it with our mobile phones and we'll know.
So our idea is very simple. If we can do something like very easy to detect and difficult to counterfeit to introduce in the note, and it will be, if suppose indigenous, then hard to counterfeiter for the counterfeit these kind of the notes. And second thing is our country importing a lot of these pigment, not only for the bank notes. It's a lot of items. Like if you do the stamp paper, if you see the our passport, if you see the postal orders. So everywhere we have required these kind of pigment to make as a security feature. So if we will develop indigenously in our India, like in Make in India program, so we have our own ink or like our own security feature with our own priorities.
His point about the inks being indigenous is actually an important one. It costs a lot of money to print money. According to the Reserve Bank of India, 40% of that money goes towards importing paper and ink. And of course, relying on indigenous technology is also important for the country's own security. Gupta's lab has recently signed a contract with the Security Printing and Minting Corporation. So it's likely that Indian currency, printed with ink made in India, will find its way into our hands soon. For Nature India, this is Amrita Gupta.
Bipin Kumar Gupta looks all set to leave his mark, in this case quite literally with his security inks. But even with more secure features on our currency notes, the question remains, as Arpan Banerjee rightly points out, whether we will pay enough attention to them or not. Did you like this episode? Well, if you did, you can subscribe to the Nature India podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes. For more science news and research highlights from India, you can log on to www.nature.com/nindia. This is Shubhra Priyadarshini for the Nature India podcast.